Radha Sameda Krishna, Krishna Radha Sameda Krishna, Krishna Radha Sameda Krishna. കള്ളത്തരങ്ങളെ തുള്ളികളായി കണ്ടനരം കൊണ്ടലായി കൊണ്ടലിൽ മിന്നലായി മിന്നൽ വള കയ്യിൽ ഇട്ട പെണ്ണഴകേ എത്തിത്തോടാൻ എത്തുകില്ല മാറി വീഴാനു നീ.
We spoke about a lot of songs, Sid, but this particular song, Nee Singam Dan, which happens to be everyone's favorite. It is Virat Kohli's favorite. How was recording that particular song?
From the word go, it's one of those songs, the first note is just like this like royal kind of, and I poured everything into that when I was recording. I was like, other songs during that time, songs like Sama Javadagamana, Yenene Pirindai, Unna Neneche, those are all recorded during that same period. That he knows how to trust his gut. Because intentionally, sometimes I do it because I want to.
In case you're wondering what is happening here, it's still the two of us. This is Srinivasa Ramanujam from The Hindu, and here we have with us popular singer, musician Sid Sriram. And this change of clothes is to signify the different musical worlds that Sid occupies. Welcome back, brother. How are you?
Good.
Sid, we spoke about Semmangudi, we spoke about GNB Mama, we spoke about all these doyens of Carnatic music in our earlier segment.
Yeah.
What was the first international song or artist that made you, sit up and say, hey, this is so cool?
I think normally when I grew up in the States, we'd come to Chennai for summers. There was one summer, probably when I was 7 or 8 years old, where we didn't. We stayed back there. And it was a pretty boring summer. Like most of my friends had left for vacation. But my parents had bought me a Walkman, like a radio.
Yeah.
So I'd just spend a lot of my days just like walking around the backyard or just listening to music and just shifting through the different radio stations and seeing what I found. One day I kind of accidentally chanced upon the local jazz station, which then led me to discovering Stevie Wonder. And his music, he's the first artist that really captivated me in terms of like an R&B soul artist. Something about his vocal texture, the way he emoted. But more than any of that, I think I found in R&B soul music almost a kindred spirit to Carnatic music, technically. In that form, similar to our brigas and gamakas in Carnatic music, they had embellishments and vocal riffs. That is a very integral part to that form. So once I heard that, like some spark went off in my brain. I was like, there's something there. And I became obsessed. So I went out and bought a bunch of Stevie Wonder CDs, and just really started diving into that genre of music and imbibing it, taking it in. And that led me to then discover other R&B artists, gospel artists, soul artists like Aretha Franklin, B.B. King, who's a blues artist, Luther Vandross, so on and so forth.
So let me get this straight. There is this Carnatic vocal music class that your mother is taking place in one room.
Yes.
And then, Sid on the other room is probably listening to a Stevie Wonder song and vibing to it. This kind of exposure is crazy and it gives you insane kind of musical spirit, right?
Most definitely. I think the biggest thing for me was that for the first time I found a form there in the States that I felt like I could really like embrace as maybe not my own, but really embrace as something I was deeply passionate about. It was so completely unknown to me. Nothing about it was something that like I had the cultural cues for. It was something I was just discovering from scratch, and it was a wide open space. And at that time, there was we had like dial-up internet and stuff like that, but I wasn't on I didn't have a laptop or anything. So my time, like at night before I go to bed, I just have my headphones on, just listening to music, just dreaming up worlds, just in the dark. And it was such a magical time. I think it was also very formative for me in terms of my kind of taking in these two forms as very kind of core anchor points to who I am. I never really felt like the source point, the spirit of both of these things felt like it was the same place though.
So can you recall any couple of songs that you would have, sung back then when, nobody was listening, and when the Carnatic music, routines were done, and you'd come back and when you had your Walkman on, what were the kind of songs that you were listening to at that point?
There's one song by Stevie Wonder specifically. It was the first one that I fell in love with, which is one of his big hits. It's called Overjoyed. And I had actually I went out and bought a CD of one of his live albums. It's called Natural Wonder. It's him performing in, I believe it's Osaka in Japan. But that song, I can sing a couple lines of it. Over time, I've been building my castle of love, just for two. Though you never knew you were my reason, I've gone much too far for you now to say that I've got to throw my castle away. And then it goes on. But yeah, it's a beautiful composition. Also, actually, now that I sing that, Carnatic music is a linear form, right? There's no harmony. So listening to Stevie, listening to like a lot of that soul music of that, like the yesteryears, was my introduction to harmony and understanding chords and how beautifully that can push a song along. And Stevie Wonder is, in my opinion, probably like the true master of harmony in the context of pop songs. So he was making pop music, accessible music, but the chord changes that he would use, the way he would choose to use them, even in this, there's certain modulations at certain points of the song that are just genius.
Sid, you of course went on to study music at Berkeley, right? So I wanted to know, earlier in this conversation, you spoke about being musically inclined while some of your other classmates were very academically inclined and looking at studies in a big way, which sort of did not connect with you in a big way because you were interested in music.
Yeah.
So once Sid Sriram goes to Berkeley and finds a lot of people who are very like-minded and who are, all pursuing music in various capacities and all that, how did that feel?
Oh, it's like my whole universe opened up. I feel like up until that point, I feel like so much of my perspective and it just felt like there was like this narrow sliver of an experience that I was living. Because there was nothing to, obviously there was music at home all the time, but I didn't have peers of mine who were as passionate. They weren't like discovering Jimi Hendrix at like in 8th grade and like losing their minds and be like, dude, did you that wasn't the conversations I was having. So when I got there, it was like an immediate, just like, oh, this is where I belong.
Sid, wasn't it around this time, just after Berkeley, that Mr. AR Rahman won the Oscars? And that particular moment for you, you're an Indian who grew up in the US, and to see an Indian, a Tamilian in that sense, go on the big stage, probably the biggest stage for music that is, and win an international award of that stature. Yeah. What did that signify? How big of a cultural movement and how big of an inspiration was that particular moment for you?
It was insane. I think it was either 2009 or 2010 when he won it. I was my second year of college at the time. I was just glued to my laptop watching, like finding some stream, because we didn't have a TV or anything when we were in the dorms, and just like figuring out how I could watch. And he'd already won the Golden Globes maybe a month prior. So there was already chatter. And like you said, not just being Indian, but being from here, being from Chennai, speaking Tamil, wearing it on his sleeve. I was in my dorm room and no one else around me really cared as much, because one of my roommates was from New Jersey. He was Latino. The other one was Filipino, both from America. But so they weren't as tapped into what was going on as I was, and nor did they care as much. But I was screaming when it happened. I lost my shit, and it was just such an inspiring moment. For the reasons that you mentioned. I think for the first time looking at pop culture at the highest level, the Oscars is one of the biggest kind of moments that occurs. And to see Sir win the award, say what he said in Tamil, and just kind of like stand with there's just like this pride, that he obviously had, and that inspired deep pride around the world. It was, for me, I think it also was the first moment where I was like, oh, this is possible. I don't have to play second fiddle. I don't have to be a side character. I can be the main character in this story, because here's a man was doing it, not compromising a thing, following his principles, being comfortable in who he is, and going and showcasing that. It was everything for me at that time. And also that's also like watching that happen was also what kind of gave me the impetus to send him an email, because in my mind, once that happened, I was like, oh, anything is possible. And when I sent him that first email, I actually didn't think he'd respond. It was more of just, I think my parents were a little stressed out of how I was going to make money once I graduated college, and like they were very much put like behind me. Actually, they were pushing me to go to Berkeley instead of going to another university, so I could really commit to this kind of path in music. But like any parents, they didn't know, like, okay, what's the actual professional path once he's done over there. So, but seeing Sir win that award, or multiple awards, it inspired me, just as like it gave me a sense of confidence, and it spurred me into action as well, for sure.
Right, of course, after the email that you sent, he roped you in for Adiye, which you recorded over Skype, and then we can say the rest is history.
Sure.
But what I would, of course, you've sung more songs for him, and one of the biggest hits being Kalipogade, and of course later Nee Singam Dan. Now, a lot of people I meet, singers, musicians, talk to me about this, musical scientist in Mr. Rahman, about how he improvises, about how a track is born in that sense. Based on your interactions with him, specific to these 3 songs probably, could you give us some instances of where you saw the musical scientist in him?
Yeah, I would actually maybe challenge that and say that he's more of an abstract artist. I don't think he's much of a scientist. I think he very much, at least in my musical experiences with him, he very much operates from a place of deep intuition. I don't even know how much of it is like a logical, like this and then this and then this. I think he is so tapped in with both himself, the universe around him, and the divine, that he knows how to trust his gut. So when we're recording, the best, I guess, example, let's take Yannode Nirundal, for example, right? There's like, I need to remember the specific phrases, but there's a couple of times where we'd be recording, he's like, try a Sangadi here, not he didn't say something, but try something here. And it'll be like off the cuff, just like real time ideas that's coming. And I'll try it. It might be good. If it's not good, he keeps moving. If it's good, he's like that. And he knows how because he can listen to his internal voice so clearly, he knows if even a subtle something changes the texture of a whole phrase or thereby the whole song. For him, I can't speak for him obviously, but I think part of the fun in making music is probably in the fact that he might not know exactly how he wants to get there, but he knows that this is the destination. But then the fun is in like, and it goes back to what we were talking about before, but improvising, exploration. Hyper present is what he is.
Right. Sid, we spoke about these 3 songs, right? Adiye, maybe Ennode Nirundal, which you just sung, and Nee Singam Dan. All these 3 songs, accesses the high notes pretty much, right? You go to the higher end of your voice.
Yeah.
When you compare that with a song like your Psycho song, which you sang for Mr. Ilaiyaraaja, which accesses your lower notes in that sense, for lower registers, and this which so musically, can you explain to us how challenging is it to do these 2 various to scale that scale and to access this scale without going into the composers itself, and just talking about the compositions?
I think well, my sweet spot is my higher range. I love singing high notes. I love belting them out. I think Sir has always known that about me. And when we again when we were recording that one, I was like, oh, I feel like this might be too high for me. And he's like, no, it's fine, just do it. So he had not a doubt in his mind. And I feel like that's how he's approached kind of guiding me every song we've recorded. He pushes me with the confidence that I can deliver. But the higher range, again, is something I'm much more used to singing. That's always been the part of my voice that I feel like I really resonate in. And I've always been a little bit more nervous about my lower register. கேட்ட உலகத்தை நான் வாங்கி தருவேனே, நீ இல்லா உலகத்தை நான் வாழ மாட்டேனே, என்னோடு நீ இருந்தாய். So when it came to recording Unna Nenichu, I was a little nervous, but that nervous about singing in the lower register was greatly overshadowed by my nervousness of working with Raja sir for the first time. So all I was doing was just like, again, being present and said, follow every direction to the T. There's been interesting moments of him guiding me during sessions. The most direct kind of interaction I had with him was just getting his blessings. And I think that was after the second song I sang for Psycho. And he very, very kindly said, "Oh, you're already blessed." He did bless me, but it was really sweet. But I haven't had many interactions with him outside of just that. Most of it has just been taking direction from him when I'm recording the songs.
So when you're online, right, we have these frequent wars about Mr. Ilaiyaraaja and Mr. AR Rahman. Some of it gets nasty with people, sparring comments and things like that. But some of the conversation there makes you discover new things that you probably didn't know about a particular composer, irrespective of which camp you are in, if you are at all in any camp. Now, you having worked with both these people in different capacities, I'd like to know, would you term their approaches to music as radically different, or are they pretty much the same?
They're not pretty much the same. That I'm pretty sure they're not. But I don't also think that they're as like polar opposite as people make them out to be. I think I've said this before, I think, and I mentioned about AR sir, but he knows what the final painting looks like. Same way Raja sir is clear. I think their methodology to get to that point is different. Obviously the style of music is different. You know what I mean? Like what they're pulling from, their influences must be different. There might be overlap, but I don't think there's like this super specific, like very diametrically opposite approach. I think there has to be overlap, and I think any composer will have their unique way of making music, depending on what technology they decide to use, what kinds of instruments, what their melodic kind of backbone is, so on and so forth.
Right.
But I think you look at all the greats, and there will, as much as there will be differences, there will also be a fair section of overlap. And I think the biggest overlap will be in the idea of surrender. Just like surrendering to the moment is going to be true with any of the greats. They know that it's greater than just an individual pursuit, that there's a higher power. I know with both of them, their faith in God is immense and strong, you know what I mean? And that's a pretty huge overlap if you ask me. But yeah, methodology is always going to be different. It comes down to like time frame that they exist in, and so on and so forth.
Sid, we spoke about two very popular composers, but there was one composer in 2020 as well. This composer called Sid Sriram, who composed for a Tamil film called Vaanam Kottattum. Tell me about your experiences during that particular stage when you ventured into music composition, and what your lessons have been from that phase.
What I learned from that process is it's a very immersive experience where you're in that world for, let's say, 8 months or something, right? However long that process is. And you're not thinking about much else. You're like, that is what you obsess over day in and day out almost. And I really enjoyed it. I think one of my biggest, or not even one, the biggest gift from that process for me was getting to interact with Mani sir as often as I did. I was recording and making and composing music in the studio that's in the basement of Madras Talkies. And sir is at the high level of the building. So he'd come down to listen to tunes. I'd get to, just like discuss ideas with him. He'd give me feedback. And I'm not the most talkative person, nor is he. So it wasn't like I would be like trying to talk his ear off. So I think he felt pretty comfortable with having me in the building. But I learned so much just by way of his perspective on things, not just musically, but just life-wise. This was also the first time that was the first time I was composing for a movie. I was pretty nervous when we released the first single, how it would be received. And he had some very sage kind of words to offer me of letting go at that point, that it is no longer in your hands, and you keep going. You do the work and you keep pushing. Right? So I think those lessons that I learned from him were immense. Getting to talk to him, someone who I've looked up to my whole life was really beautiful. Working with the director Dana was really good. I also realized for me that process it takes up. I already said it takes up all your thinking, and I still managed to record other songs during that time. Songs like Sama Javadagamana, Yen Enne Pirindai, Unna Nenechu. Those are all recorded during that same period. And I look back and I'm pretty impressed that I was able to do all this and do that, and then roll into December seasonal Carnatic concerts. Being a musician, being a singer, there's a lot of ego involved. You're thinking about yourself all the time. And especially now with social media, you're always like, oh, should I post this? How are people going to react? Looking at comments, people are talking about you. You know, you're like, and in that paradigm, making music for a movie where you're ultimately serving the film, you're not serving your own kind of creative, your creative kind of spontaneous ideas here and there.
Yeah.
It's a completely different kind of process. And I think it was really good for me to get that perspective, because then you stop romanticizing this idea of like being a star and all that. You're like, no, there's a project, there is a mission. One has to complete the mission. That is like all you're thinking about. And that was really good for me at that stage. That was 2020. So yeah, I was just about to turn 30 at that time. And it was good for me to get that perspective, because I think since then, it's like there's a before and there's an after. The after has been very much me keeping in mind the selflessness, the humility. Not that I don't think I was ever arrogant as such, but again, just by virtue of the fact that this industry and this line of work has a lot of eyeballs on you and your own eyeballs on yourselves, you know, it allowed me the space to understand what real humility was.
I remember having a previous conversation with you in which you said, you know, in your earlier years, you were chasing celebritydom, if I can call it that.
Yep.
So what was your definition of fame back then, and how has it changed since your success and since your recent hits?
I think when I was growing up, fame just looked like glamour to me. It looked like, or beyond that, it looked like being recognized for what you do. And I've always had a chip on my shoulder, because I've always known how good I am as far back as I can remember. And for the most part, I've always gotten acknowledged. You know, performances in my mom's school, talent shows, where I went to school, there'd always be like this rush of attention. And I always liked that a lot, because I felt like I was being validated for something that I was putting the work in for, you know, and that I was quite good at. Almost felt entitled to it, you know. I felt like I deserve the attention and the accolade and being celebrated and all that. And I think that's what fame has been or was when I was younger. I was like, this is something I need to get, because I have to prove to the world that I'm this good, and everyone has to know and accept it. And, you know, so it was almost like, it felt like I was trying to, like assert dominance in a way, and celebrity and fame would be a tool in doing that. And also, we talked about it before, but amidst identity crisis and this and that, you kind of start grasping for what's going to allow you to feel good about yourself, and also give you a sense of like, this is who I am. Totally. And when I was younger, I think fame and the idea of being recognized for my music and celebrated seemed like the most logical way of me really forming my identity. That's before it happened. Then Adiye happened, Gender Indian Al happens. Songs are big and celebrated, but people aren't recognizing me on the street. And in my mind, Adiye comes out and I'm like, oh, life is going to change drastically. I'm going to be mobbed everywhere I go, so on and so forth. That did not happen. And I'm so glad, because it like, I built up all this anticipation, and we know Adiye, like, the song was almost not going to happen, or like maybe a different singer. And I recorded it in February, I want to say, of 2012. And the song released November of 2012. So there was like a decent amount of time in between. So then all the anticipation builds up. You're like, oh, wow, this is going to be a huge moment. And it was. You know, at that time, I don't know if there's anyone from the States who had gotten to record at the highest level with the true greatest, you know, like with Sir and Mani Sir. And so like everyone was super excited, but I had built up a whole other expectation in my brain, right? So that didn't happen, and it was very deflating in the moment, especially when I returned back to the US. So we were in Chennai when the song released, obviously here for the December season. That's also when Sir did a big Chennai show. I think that was not Nenjay, whatever was the name of the show before that. And the show was insane. Thousands upon thousands of people at YMCA ground. I get introduced, like I'd come up on a hydraulics riser, like the works. And that was super exciting. We went to the launch of Kadal, so there's enough things happening when I was here in Chennai for that span where my ego was still well fed. I was like, oh, everything is magical. Then we go back to the States in January after everything, or February or whatever. And I go back to a very normal lifestyle where there's no fanfare, there's nothing. And that was a very humbling time for me because, again, once you build up all this expectation, then you go back to, I was back at my parents' place, and I think I was trying to make it in LA, making an album there. Nothing was quite clicking. But that was the time where I kind of fell back in love with just the rigor of practicing and falling in love with music for the right reasons. 2015 specifically, I was back in November, got a call from Sir's office to come record. And then I think it was January of 2015, December of 2015, we recorded Talli Pogade, came on the first, and then the rest after that was just all those things that I'd coveted and dreamt up, and all those things happened, and I was so much more ready for it. Not to say it didn't go to my head. I'm sure it went to my head a little bit at first, but I think I had the tools within myself to bring myself back to ground and do it for the right reasons. Since I've become famous, celebrity, whatever, there's still a bit of a tug of war because careers don't go like this, or they don't go like this. They go like this, and they go like this, and there's a whole spectrum of experience within it.
Yeah.
And one's ego and such gets used to something, then you'll have a slight drop, and then you have to readjust, recalibrate. Then you go back up, and you have to tell yourself you're going back into rarefied air. Get ready. It's like a constant process. But I think I have a very logical relationship with it now. Where
right, and that brings me to your recent collaboration with Warner Music India. We've had two songs, I think. One is a religious song and one is a song on longing and all that. Sid, what does this musical collaboration mean to you, and what do you have in store for fans in the future?
My company, The Hybridist, and Warner Music India, we did a joint venture that kicked off at the beginning of this year. For me, my perspective is super unique. I feel like I exist in this center point that has an kind of equal vision of the East and India specifically, and also the West. And I've been situated in this space since the beginning of my career. I've always kind of remained in the periphery, obviously giving myself, immersing to the music completely, but maintaining this vantage point of being able to see both places. At first, it was more just a subconscious, almost by default thing. And then I've really embraced it over the years and enjoyed the fact that I can look at both parts of the world, take in perspective and information from both parts, and factor that into the music I make, but just how I kind of digest information about music globally. I think when I first started, the West was not yet ready to take the Indian perspective seriously, artistically. It was just a very, very tiny sliver that they were willing to take on and embrace. And I would say even now, the sliver has gotten a tad bit wider. It's not like they're you know what I mean? There's still a bit of they expect, and I don't mean it literally, but they expect a song and dance from artists that originate from this part of the world. I mean, again, I don't mean that actual song and dance, but they want us to fit a certain predetermined stereotype still to this day. But because of the advent of the internet, social media, how information is just flying around the world in an instant like this infinitely, not just the acceptance of the Indian perspective across the globe, there is a hunger for it. Because music is saturated in most places. Anywhere you go, there's millions of songs being released over the course of sometimes days and stuff, right? So So with that, there's a thirst for new perspectives, new ideas. And I see that's true here as well. We're obviously seeing a shift in terms of the role of films in servicing music to audiences.
Complete.
Where we're seeing different avenues, and those avenues are no longer niche. They are getting more views many times than film songs, right? So, so this partnership happened at this time. Me and my team felt like it was the right time because I have this wealth of knowledge, not just musically, but also in terms of like the music business and how it moves across the world and various markets and such. So the partnership, the core ethos of it is to take sounds that are rooted in Southern India, at least at first, and take those and take them out to the world.
Right.
And really imagine them or reimagine those kind of rooted South Indian sounds in a way that can be for the future, make for sounds that people have never heard before. And starting off kind of gradual with it, the one thing I've learned is that rushing anything normally makes for a weak foundation, and a weak foundation makes for something that's going to crumble quickly. So the first song that we released was almost done auspiciously, I think, was a version of Tirpugar Sivana that we talked about that I performed at Coachella. We shot the video at the Batu Caves in Kuala Lumpur. And it was during a festival that has like 1.1 million people coming over the course of a day and a half. And one of my biggest kind of rules I made for myself as I'm making music and releasing it through this partnership is that the experience of creating both the music and the visuals and everything around it has to be the gift, right? The releasing of it will be a byproduct of that same energy and that momentum, but I want the experience of making this stuff to feel ultra, ultra special. Because I've seen every time when the creation of a song has felt like magic, it ends up doing what it has to do, But if you put the cart before the horse and say, we got to make a hit, chances are it's not going to be a hit, And I have countless experiences in my film discography. Take Madhubarte, for example, and it was my first time that Gautam Menon introduced me to Shiva, Darbuka Shiva. Just when we finished that recording that day, everyone just knew that something had happened. No one put their finger on it. No one said anything specifically about it. Tamare ma'am left the room. I think she felt quite emotional. I won't speak for her, but I believe that's what it felt like, at least. So everyone knew something had happened, and we all know what that song did. You know what I mean? Similarly, Srivalli, when I recorded with DSP for that, and just all credit goes to him, he was certain that he wanted that day to be a chill day. Sometimes I go into a recording and I'll get done 3 hours, 4 hours, get out of there, and my job's done. This one, he's like, no, let's just chill for a bit. Let's hang out. Let's get to know each other. I'd recorded one song with him before, but that was quite a quick process. This one, let's take time. I want to discover new shades of your voice, different textures. Let's break for lunch. Let's eat. Let's keep talking, and we don't have to rush anything. And that song is a direct byproduct of the fact that we just spent a day in the studio having so much fun, So these things I've learned over the years, or off my own album, when I put out, I have a song called Dear Sahana off my album Siddharth. And when we started writing that in Minneapolis, it was right as the pandemic was kind of winding down. And I was just in a room with 5 other musicians, not knowing any of them. We were meeting for the first time. But everyone was just so excited to be in a room with other musicians again, jamming. There was no question about, this is going to be a hit. Have we found the hook? Nothing. It was just let's make music because that's what we feel like doing. Let's make it one of the most enjoyable experiences we've ever had. And again, that was the most successful song off the album when it came on Tiny Desk. It was everywhere. It was like a real cultural moment. So that ethos we've really taken in to this partnership as well.
Right.
In that, we see that we live in a world that focuses on trends and getting the right dance step or whatever. And I don't want to do that. Not to say that there won't be dance steps and such. Maybe there will be. Who knows? And to extend, this is not only going to be a partnership that deals in releasing my music, but I'll also be signing other acts. So it'll cover a whole spectrum.
So what are your upcoming projects with respect to this particular collaboration? Whatever you can tell us at
Well,
this
there's
stage.
one specific song that when I walked into that partnership, and it was the first one that I was working on at the time, where I was like, I want to release this one. And so that we're shooting a video for soon, and it'll come out later this summer. And I can sing a bit of that if that's okay. There's an opening like swaram portion of that. That's the intro to the song. It goes, Gama papa maga gari sama ga gari sa sa ri ri gari sa ni ni sa sa gama papa maga gari sa sa ri ga pa pa ga pa maga ni. It's like the intro to the song, and it's the song I'm most excited about, at least as of now.
I wanted to ask your thoughts about one particular song. We spoke about a lot of songs, Sid, but this particular song, Nee Singam Dan, which happens to be everyone's favorite. It is Virat Kohli's favorite.
You'll be shocked. Nee Singam Dan.
You know that, right? And how was recording that particular song? And it got a new lease of life after, people played it in the CSK bandwagon. It was played during the CSK match. I went for one and I heard Nee Singam Dan being played when, MS Dhoni walked in.
Yep.
And of course, later, Virat Kohli, announced that it was his favorite song.
Yeah.
How do you react to all that?
It's awesome, man. I think recording that one also, I was in Colorado at the time. Sir was in Chennai. So it was a remote recording. But as soon as I got that, like the rough of that, when they sent me the files, it was pretty clear that it's like a really special piece. From the word go, it's one of those songs, the first note is just like this like royal kind of, there's just a real presence to it. So as soon as I heard the rough, I knew it was special, and I poured everything into that when I was recording. I was like in a specific phase of my life, and I felt like that song came to me at a really opportune time, where just a bunch of emotions and such that had been pent up, and I just gave everything to that one. And to see how it's been celebrated has been amazing. And like you said, it's gotten like 2 or 3 leases on life. First one that came out, and I think it was quite successful when it came out from Patatala in the context of the film, and then it became like the anthem for Dhoni. And I think that first happened when a DJ played the song as he was walking out. Was that the match that you were at?
Correct.
That's so amazing. So I was in the US at the time, so I just got tagged in a bunch of videos like what's going on, and I saw that, and that was great. And then recently to see Virat kind of like embrace it and say it's his favorite, it's always humbling. But I understand why that song feels like a song for champions. You know what I mean? It's like a real song of true victory, in that you look at those lyrics, like that Charanam is நீ கேட்கலாம் ஊரெல்லாம் சொந்தம் கொண்டாடும் சிலரின் பேரத்தான் சரிதம் காலங்கள் போனாலும். This next one. அது யாரென்ற முடிவு இங்கு யாரோடும் இல்லை, அது நீ என்று நினைத்தால் நீரைவன் கைப்பிள்ளை புகழ் வந்தாலும் அது கூட கடந்தான் என்று. That line to me is like encapsulates what that is, because it's kind of what we've already talked about today, but like praise and honor and being put on this pedestal, that's borrowed. Like that is not. He said, but he gave up his crown right after. I mean, it just gives me chills, like even just saying those lines. But Vivek really knocked those lyrics. I messaged him as soon as I was recording. I was like, man, this is special. Because to get that sentiment right and for it to not feel cheesy is so hard. Because it's a deep, deep, deep sentiment, right? But you can quite easily overdo it, and it just loses its like presence, and it loses that weight. But the way he wrote that, obviously Sir's compositions are, I mean, we all know that he's the best of the best. But like that one, I mean, I think throughout my career, I've gotten, I really can stand firmly on every song that I've sung, maybe barring 1 or 2 that we don't have to talk about. But for the most part, I'm really proud of every piece. But in the scheme of things, 1 or 2 every few years will pop out to be like, I just feel like they've been gifted to me almost, right? And this is one of them where, man, when we play this one live, like I almost every time will tear up during this exact line. Because you're doing it in front of like 14,000, 15,000 people. So you're really living it, This is not just some abstract thing that I'm sitting in my bedroom talking about, but you're in front of thousands performing this, so in front of people who really put you up on that pedestal, and you're giving yourself to them. Man, there's nothing like
Wow. You said you're adept at both Carnatic and the R&B style of music, and which is why you also agreed to this such a cool concept that we are doing, where we wear a kurta and veshti in one part of the interview, and of course there's in slightly cooler clothes in the second part. In fact, when Adiye released, I remember having a conversation with you, and you said that ARR sir selected you for that particular track because of your ability to shine in both these two musical worlds.
Yeah.
Just to sum it up, now that you are adept at both Carnatic and the R&B style, how do you ensure an overlap doesn't happen, right? Like if you were in a kacheri, how do you ensure, or how do you think that, okay, this is a Carnatic kacheri and I should stay true to this form and this audience? Or so maybe a film concert or in R&B. How do you ensure that this musical worlds, two musical worlds that you possess, that you have inside you, do not overlap with each other? Because the audiences could be different, and their tastes and their expectations from you for that particular time will be quite different. So how do you ensure this?
Yeah, I think one thing, I'll just make one slight, I'll specify one thing. I think how do I ensure that I don't unintentionally overlap them? Because intentionally, sometimes I do it because I want to, for sure. I think the way is just practice. Just like, right? I've always had the ability to like flip between the two pretty easily and shapeshift. But that ability has become even more precise and even more acute over the years, just because I practice so much every day. So I know, I was thinking about this yesterday when I was singing, I was practicing at home, but I know my voice so well now. I have true, I think, command over, but beyond command, I know it. And I know even before I sing a phrase, like in the first nanosecond of a phrase, I know like where it's going to go and how to steer the ship the right way. So I see this most in Carnatic concerts. And, I practice Carnatic music now every day, as long as I'm not doing extensive traveling, for about an hour and a half to 2 hours every day. So I know that form is going to remain intact if that's what I see fit. So when I go to sing a Carnatic concert, there's never a chance that some randomly like an R&B phrase is going to come into Cambodia and I'm singing or something like that. Never going to happen. If I wanted it to, I could do it like this too. But, I know that that's not the space for it. Maybe when I'm much older, I'm going to start just to ruffle some feathers. I'll mess around. But at least for now, I'm very happy keeping the aesthetic of that concert intact. And again, when I was speaking about Flute Mali before, that's one of the main reasons at this phase of my career, I've become especially obsessed with this music, because stylistically, it's always hyper intentional, but you never really know where it's coming from. And I think there's something so inspiring about that. In the same breath, I think I can also, like, I do these shows called Boundless, where it's like an hour and a half set with me and a few other musicians, and we just make up music for an hour and a half. There's some like core resting points, if you may, like a composition here and there, but other than that, everything is made up on the spot. And those, I have the ability to go from a Carnatic space into a more soul space, into something that feels more rock, whatever it is, and shapeshift between all of it, hyper intentionally. I'm never accidentally spilling into something. And I attribute that solely just to the work that I do every day. So not just Carnatic practice, but I'm writing some kind of music every day. If it's like maybe it's like a minute long little idea, maybe it's a full song one day, maybe one day I'm just programming some drums for fun, but I'm doing it every day. So the muscle memory is super, super, super strong, where I don't have to think about the stuff anymore. I can just do it, and that's why, and I find so much inspiration in getting to explore the whole spectrum and dimension of music that makes me who I am. Because I feel like, I have all this information within me. I'm always going to take in more inspiration as well, so it's what I want to do for my whole life is just to continue exploring this, how If I feel like blurring lines, I'm going to do that. If I feel like writing a symphony one day that is just purely Western classical, understanding counterpoint, traditional harmony, all that, I'll do that at some point. You know what I mean? I've now done 2 runs of shows at a legendary jazz club in New York called the Blue Note. The first one of them I did one night with a musician named Kenny Garrett. He's a jazz saxophonist, and he's a legend. I think maybe one of the last living members of Miles Davis's band from way back. So he's like seen generations. So, you know, I can jump into that space. And that's what makes all of this so exciting for me, is the fact that the exploration, the discovery, I still feel like I'm at the very beginning of my career, like now. And I don't even say that just to be cute or like to like, you know, for the sake of it. I really, really feel like I've just barely scratched the tip of the iceberg. Forever been very clear about that this is always going to be a pursuit. You're never going to, there's no real mountaintop to this. Because once you get to one, there's another one that's right over there. You know what I mean? So, and at times it's frustrating because, you know, when you're right up against a glacier and you can't really make sense of it, it can have its moments of disillusionment and frustration. But I've had that at various points in my life, and I've always come out on the other side just a much more, a musician of more depth, you know, and I've always had the blessing of having an audience to share that journey with. So I'm just very grateful for all of it.
We're looking forward to more exploration from your part, Sid. It was so great to, you know, have this conversation in 2 parts and discover nuggets of your mind and how you think of your music in both these worlds that you occupy. Wishing you all the best for your future.
Thank you.
I hope you get far more, you know, expertise in both these worlds that you occupy right now, and I hope you scale greater heights in both these. All the best, Sid.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate
Thank you.
it.